And I apologize, you were on mute.
Oh. Okay, can you guys hear me?
My fault.
All right, so we are kicking off the January meeting of the Budget, Education, and City Services Committee. My name is Tristan Haas, the chair. And we have 3 items on the agenda for this evening. The first is a request by the borough president to sign on to a letter in support of the New York State No Cap Act amendment. The second is a presentation by the Bellevue Community Advisory Board representatives who are seeking community board support for certain state legislative and budget requests. And then finally, we are having a non-voting action item, just 2025 BEX committee planning and priority brainstorming session. So we're going to kick off with the New York State No Cap Act amendment discussion. And I will pass the baton over to Ari for the presentation. Ari, go ahead.
Thank you, Kristen. I appreciate it. My name is Ari Gershengorn. I'm the legislative director for Assemblyman Alex Boris. And I'm here to talk about, obviously, I'm here to talk about we've renamed it the Uncapped Justice Act. The problem that it's a bill that we've introduced in Albany. The problem it is trying to solve is that in New York, unlike basically any other state, there's an artificial limit on the number of judges you can have, the number of elected Supreme Court judges that are allowed to be in the state. So at present, we can have 1 Supreme Court judge for every 50,000 New Yorkers, which has an artificial limit on the number of judges that we can have. Manhattan faces the issue that arises from this is a massive case backlog. Manhattan has 42,000 backlogged cases as of this summer. It's even more now, resulting in businesses leaving the state as their civil litigation gets delayed and held up in court. It allows for long pretrial detention and all of the harms to public safety that come with that. And the bill is a simple fix. It removes the requirement that there be some sort of limit placed on how many judges we can add. The bill is as a constitutional amendment. We've passed it once in the legislature. Constitutional amendments have to pass in consecutive legislative sessions. We passed it once. We got to pass it again, and then it goes to the people for an up-down referendum, and that would be around 2026 if we pass it this year. The bill has broad support from all over the state. It's the top legislative priority for the New York City Bar. The governor is in support. Attorney General Letitia James is in support. It's gotten particular backing from Manhattan. It has the co-sponsorship of every Manhattan Assembly member, including the incoming ones. Obviously, the borough president is in support. It's a priority for Keith Wright, and all the bill does is strikes this anachronistic 100-year-old requirement that places an artificial and outdated limit on the number of judges that Manhattan can elect to adjudicate the caseload that we have. It has not the bill or the amendment of the clause in the Constitution hasn't been updated in the last 80 years when caseloads were a third of what they are now. And it's high time that we get rid of it. So I'm happy to answer any questions and any thoughts and concerns anyone might have about it.
Thank you, Ari. Does anyone have any questions for Ari? Mark.
I have one question. What is the opposition to this change, and what's the argument?
So the opposition has come from some judges. So the acting judges have been in support. The elected Supreme Court, some organizations representing elected Supreme Court judges have been opposed. They have had concerns, at least publicly, on diversity grounds. So they argue that it would it's a lot of Bronx judges, although some in Manhattan as well, argue that it would harm diversity on the bench. We think the opposite is true. In fact, I think it would help diversity on the bench, allowing for more seats on the court would allow, the people that tend to be elected tend to be a younger, more diverse set than those that have been on the court for the last 40 or so years, when diversity in the judiciary was less of a focus than it is now. And to assuage some of those concerns, such as they are, at the recommendation of the city bar, who has been kind of a consistent advocate for this, we introduced a companion bill that we're not seeking community board support for, but just an additional policy that would place some guidelines on the legislature, requiring them to consider factors like backlog and what have you, but specifically diversity in apportioning judicial seats for elections. So just as the same way that I'm sure the assembly would be nervous about a bill that added more assembly members, I think the judges are nervous about a bill that could potentially add more judges. Although I think that rather than harm, their main claim is that it would harm diversity. I think that would not be the case, but that's been the bulk of the opposition.
All right.
Has there been any thought to what the max cap would be for a new no cap environment? Is it how are new judges brought up to be elected? What is the level of like the population ratio that might exist in a future state? What does the bill propose?
The bill proposes no cap at all, the way that exists in, I believe, 47 other states and all other 10 trial level courts in New York. The limit as it is only exists in New York. And if there are concerns about kind of abuse of the legislature to add more judges and dilute the power of existing judges, to the extent that is a concern, it hasn't happened in the other 10 trial level courts where it could potentially happen. So that hasn't really been an issue. There have been, I guess I'll leave it there, but we're proposing, hence the no cap, we're proposing no limit on no constitutional limit on the number of judicial seats that there can be, and just the regular legislative limit that would be imposed by the legislature, by the people through their elected officials.
So in the bill, is there any type of criteria that's been set to assess current states of needs today and then into the future?
Sure. So we haven't, the bill as it is doesn't address that, but sort of the companion bill, it's called the Do the Math Act. The companion bill I was referencing earlier does set out those explicit guidelines. And that would be, we would love if they passed together. Obviously, if they can't, they can't, but we've introduced both and are pushing for both. Because we think that the most important thing here is to make sure that there is no cap on the number of judges, and sort of an assessment of the state of need and considering a good deal of other factors, I think is a fantastic idea and one that's been written into legislation that we're proposing and pushing for.
Thank you.
You're on.
Thank you. I think this is much needed, and I'm glad we're talking about it. My question is about beyond. So the issue of judicial backlog is one that a lot of people have written about, and I think the comptroller here released a report over the summer about it. And most people who talk about this issue say that the issue goes far beyond just capacity and number of judges, that there's a lot of technological issues in the judiciary, things like that. Now, I understand with division of power, with separation of powers, that there's only so much the legislature can do about this. But are there other, I'm just curious, are there other ways that you think the assembly can help with this issue and encourage the judiciary to make even broader necessary changes to help with the backlog?
Yeah, absolutely. So 100%. I think this bill is a good way to address some of the backlog, but obviously, as you pointed out, is not the only way. The one that comes to mind for me is a lot of courts currently operate purely on paper dockets, to say nothing of up-to-date 2024 technology. A lot don't have computers. That's an overstatement. It's not quite true. But the reliance on paper and the reliance on outdated 1990s filing systems to get things moving in our judiciary is kind of another way to tackle this. As always, it's easy to discuss funding. We just increased funding for problem-solving courts. That's a good first step. And yeah, and I think OCA has been very proactive and looking at and dealing with other ways to do this.
Thank you. Charles, did you still have a question? Your hand went down.
Yes. I had a question. Is it possible if you could please speak on a little bit, a brief history of the rationale to why the cap was first introduced in the first place and the intent of it?
Sure. So the bill was the clause was put in, as I said, some 200 years ago, 150 years ago, because they were worried in 1846 that the legislature would use it as leverage to try to repress the wages of judges. I do not think that has ever been a problem in New York. I've never found a time when we passed a measure reducing the salary of judges, neither in the Supreme Court nor in any other trial level court. At least that hasn't happened in my lifetime. And so it's sort of an archaic concern, and it's been sort of recognized over time that it started at 81 per one judge per 80,000 people, then dropped to 70, then 60, then 50, where it currently stands. And the measure of this is as people have been as the legislature has kind of been recognizing throughout the decades. This is sort of as case loads grow and as cases become more complex, this is sort of an outdated requirement, and each legislature sort of just kicks the can down the road a couple decades, which we're trying to kind of stop altogether.
Any other questions from Mike Kabak?
Yeah. Ari, is there any parallel in this measure with the request to increase the number of Supreme Court justices that was initiated back when FDR was president, to dilute certain, is there any kind of parallel between that and this?
So I don't think there is. And I think the main difference is I think the word Supreme Court is a bit of a misnomer. The correct parallel between the state Supreme Court and the federal court system would be the appellate court, where there isn't the same kind of sanctity around numbers. And I don't think there is. We're not trying to expand the highest court, which would be the appellate court. And obviously the bill in and of itself doesn't even expand it. It would just allow the legislature to. And the legislature has, again, for every other court system, the ability to do this. And there's nothing inherently that makes the Supreme Court, which again, when I say supreme, I don't mean the highest court, which would be the appellate court. Sort of, it's the mid-level trial court. There's nothing that makes them particularly special or particularly sacred that would require this sort of limit. But I see where you're coming from, but I don't think the analogies are I don't think the analogy is perfect there.
Thank you.
Mark?
So I had a question that I think you may have touched upon in response to Yaron's question, but to your knowledge, does the state have the funding for more judges?
So the state, I don't know whether I think this bill doesn't address that is the short answer. I think the state definitely should fund additional judges that are added, but I think it's worth noting that this bill does not add more judges. If the state doesn't have the capacity to fund them, it can simply not add the judicial seats. It just gives them the ability to do so if and when fundings are available.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the committee board? Charles? Charles, you can unmute yourself.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Sorry
Yeah.
about that. Yes. So with the increase in judges, is there going to be an increase in public defenders? Do we know anything more about getting more legal representation for people who would need that?
So I don't know if it exactly correlates to an increase in public defenders, but I think what it would contribute to would be quicker outcomes for, let's focus on criminal, for example, because you mentioned public defenders. Under our current system, there can be really long waits pre-trial, kind of sitting in jail before you've gone before a judge in any meaningful way. And so the kind of criminal justice aspect of this would be kind of reducing the wait times in jail, not necessarily improving access to public defenders, although I think that's a good idea too. And sort of the flip side of that is the longer people spend in jail, the longer, the more crowded they become, and the tougher, and it forces, sometimes it forces DAs to make decisions on who should make bail based on the capacity of the jail, not necessarily purely based on the tendency to reoffend. So I think it kind of, this not having this artificial limit and having this massive case backlog hurts defendants and hurts the general public, I think, but these sort of long wait times. So I think it's sort of what you're getting at, Charles, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, we will open it to comments from members of the public who are interested. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none. So with that, we are now going to enter the business session, where only members of the committee can speak unless others are called upon. So the ask before us is to sign on to a letter that has been provided to us from the Manhattan Borough President's Office. I circulated the text to the committee before this meeting. I can share my screen for those who didn't get a chance to see it. Otherwise, it's in your email address. But in this scenario, I think because we've not taken a position on this in the past, if we want to sign on, we will have to take a full board action and vote to sign on. We don't need to write a separate resolution. If we're not comfortable signing on to this letter as written, then I don't think we would sign on to anything. But so I think either we sign on to this letter as written, or we kind of pass on it. So with that, I will open it to any comments. Please raise your hand if you'd like to speak. Mike Quebec.
So we've heard one side of the argument, sounds pretty convincing, it sounds pretty good, but, and I would, based on what I heard, vote for more judges, but we didn't hear the other side of the argument, and I don't know if, I'm easily swayed. I don't know about the rest of you, but I could be swayed pretty easily. So I'd just like to hear the other to see if I can compare both arguments before I make a decision.
Yeah, I will say this was posted, so if there are, it was posted to the committee
I
website,
read that,
committee board website, so
did read
it's
it.
the prerogative of people to come in if they want to offer a contrary view, but. Right
So
now,
who would come in, like a judge who would say, nah, we don't want any more people like that?
yes, someone,
And then I'd come.
they're not here. Charles. Charles, you can unmute yourself, you're still on mute.
Sorry, is that better?
Yep, perfect.
Yeah, sorry about that. Historically, from being on our committee and as a public speaker before being a community board member, this committee has, the community board has, it seems to have leaned towards more of, being in favor of rehabilitation of criminals, for example, especially being re-entering the community from incarceration and things like that. We've had people speak about second chances and things like that. So I would say that since we're in favor of helping people who are in the justice system, it seems like this would help the backlog, and it would be good so that people can have their day in court and not just be stuck in jail. So I would be in favor going on the background of our community board and of this committee in particular, its historical way of voting and its thoughts on on justice and reform.
Thank you, Charles. You're on?
Yeah, just I totally get and respect what Mike Kabak is saying. I guess I would just say one of the other signals we can use here is just the broad political support and also just how much of an outlier New York State is by having this cap provision for as Ari said, for like at the time it was well intentioned, but for sort of no good reason now. And so I think we should absolutely support this letter.
Thank you. Anyone?
Having read the borough president's letter, I don't see anything objectionable to any of the wording, so I don't see any reason not to support it.
I would additionally be in support of the letter, but I think to your point, Michael, thinking about the potential opposition to the No Cap Act. Something along the lines of what you were mentioning around like political manipulation, potentially like a speculatory avenue that might be some type of opposition to the No Cap Act, but also in terms of like how our representation is, if there's, I don't know if there might be an imbalance based on the number of justices that are elected into the future. So if today they're done on a population basis and they're at the state level, does that change the demographic of justices across the state? I'm not sure if more justices are then elected in Manhattan. If there might be any financial challenges to approving more taxpayer funding to pay additional justices. These are potential challenges, I think, that come about from the No Cap Act, but I personally don't think any of them are significant enough to not support the need highlighted by Ari and the borough president's office.
Thank you. Any other comments? So hearing all in favor so far, no opposed. So is there a motion from anyone?
A motion to approve.
Okay, I'll take that as a second. We'll jump right in. Mohit,
Yes.
Morris.
Yep.
Julie,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Mike Greenlee,
Yes,
Mark Hirschberg,
Yes.
Mike Kabak.
Yes.
Isabel Marks,
Yes.
you're on.
Yep.
Charles,
Yes.
Tiffany,
Yes.
Yoden,
Yes.
and Justine.
Yes.
And then myself, I'm a yes. I don't know where's that. Well, thank you so much for coming in and presenting, Ari. So thank you. So for your awareness, we'll be bringing this to the full board a week from Thursday, where it will ideally be ratified, and then we'll be able to sign on to the letter formally. But
Awesome.
appreciate you making.
Thank you guys so much for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is a presentation by the Bellevue Community Advisory Board seeking our support for certain legislative and budget requests. So I'll pass it over to Ryan.
Thank you, everyone, for having me. My name is Ryan Federo, and I'm on the Community Advisory Board for Bellevue. My day job, though, I'm a clinical research coordinator at Memorial Sloan Kettering, so I'm in charge of kind of running all of our global health research initiatives. But then prior to this, I was actually a management consultant focused on healthcare and kind of worked on clinical strategy and healthcare operations. These experiences, along with me currently applying to medical school, have given me quite a unique perspective on healthcare delivery in the US and abroad. I've been to Nigeria and Tanzania to kind of research cancer over there. So, really interesting perspectives on healthcare delivery. And I've seen kind of how fragmented and inequitable care can be. And Bellevue is really different. So Bellevue is the oldest public hospital in the United States, and it's not just an institution, it's a cornerstone of health equity. For centuries, it is a symbol of our collective commitment to care for everyone, regardless of income, insurance coverage, immigration status. It's a place where the doors are truly open always and for everyone. But aside from being just, aside from being a public and safety net hospital, Bellevue also offers kind of the cutting edge procedures that you see at any other hospital in the city, whether it's, cardiac catheterization or stroke center, level 1 trauma center. And some of these cutting edge procedures or services that at private hospitals, if even offered, and when reimbursed by commercial payers, those are like your Cigna, United Healthcare, Humana, often generate the margins that are necessary to subsidize lower or negative margin services such as behavioral health and emergency care, both of which Bellevue is world renowned for. Kind of movies, books written about their behavioral health, their forensic ward, as well as their trauma center. Although Bellevue does operate under fundamentally different financial pressures. So all hospitals, even not-for-profit centers, must generate a margin to survive. It's the reason I had a job as a consultant. Positive margins allow for reinvestment, and they can fund things like quality improvement, infrastructure, education, innovation. But hospitals do make money primarily through reimbursements from patients' insurers, and this includes Medicaid. And about 60% of Bellevue's patients are covered by Medicaid, but Medicaid only reimburses about 70% of the actual cost of care. So for 60% of all of Bellevue's patients, Bellevue's reimbursed only 70 cents for each dollar they spend on caring for those patients. So this leaves a huge gap. And unlike private hospitals, which rely on a more favorable payer mix skewed towards higher paying commercial insurers that can kind of make up for a gap in Medicaid patients, but also can kind of help, like I said earlier, reimburse and kind of cover the margin gap of these lower margin specialties. Bellevue's mission as a safety net hospital makes it uniquely dependent on city, state, and federal funding to close that margin gap. So even with its unmatched resilience and efficiency, Bellevue's facing mounting challenges, and the challenges are about to grow exponentially with the impending closure of Mount Sinai Beth Israel and an already overcrowded Bellevue. They're operating over 100% average daily census for months now. Is bracing for an influx of even more patients, particularly in emergency and behavioral healthcare services, of which Mount Sinai Beth Israel kind of focused on and was able to absorb some of the brunt from Bellevue as well. And both of these services, as I kind of alluded to, are pretty low margin, oftentimes even negative margin, but they're very essential areas of care. The solution is clear. Clear doesn't mean easy. And that's increasing Medicaid reimbursement rates for Bellevue and other safety net hospitals. So this isn't just a matter of financial necessity, it's a moral imperative. Because raising Medicaid reimbursement rates will allow Bellevue to continue providing world-class care to everyone who walks through its doors, while maintaining its role as a flagship hospital of the New York City health and hospital system. It'll ensure that Bellevue can expand its critical service lines, invest in infrastructure, increase capacity, and meet the growing needs of our city without compromising its historic mission. Bellevue is more than just a hospital, it's a promise that everyone, regardless of circumstance, will receive the care that they deserve and need. So tonight I ask for your support in fulfilling that promise and securing Bellevue's future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. And then Karen and Sage, will either of you be presenting, or will you just be available to respond to questions?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear.
Hi, it's Sage. Thank you so much for having us tonight. I'm the Assistant Director for Communications at Bellevue, and I am the CAB liaison. I am not presenting tonight. I'm here to answer any questions, and but I think Ryan said it beautifully. So thank you very much.
Great. Does anyone on the committee have any questions? Motor?
So you mentioned something about safety net hospitals. What is a safety net hospital, and how many are there in like our district and then in the broader city?
So Safety Net Hospital is essentially a hospital that will not turn away anyone. So Bellevue being kind of city, state, federally funded, is sort of the referral center for all of the public hospitals in the city. And it is also, the place where, like I had mentioned, no matter what insurance, no matter what kind of status you are, Bellevue will treat you. They can't turn you away. They can't discharge you because of an insurance status or ability to pay. So yeah, it's pretty much.
So how many safety net hospitals exist then? Like the district plus like maybe Manhattan?
A little louder, please.
How many safety net hospitals exist in the city and then maybe in the 5 boroughs? Or...
Sage, do you have an exact number?
Hi, we're the only one in Manhattan. New York Health and Hospital System has 11 acute facilities. So there's one in each borough, 2 in the Bronx, 2 in Brooklyn, but we're the only one in Manhattan.
Charles.
Yes, hi. Could you speak to whether Medicaid pays for the homeless population who are in the men's shelter that I believe is part of the hospital, or is that separately run by a different entity and paid for by a different source?
I will let Sage answer that one as well.
Sage, you're still on mute if you're trying to speak.
Hi, can you hear me? If you're speaking about the 30th Street Men's Shelter, that is a former property of Bellevue that is not affiliated with Bellevue at all. However, that is run by a separate entity. However, we do treat patients from that shelter who need treatment.
You're on?
Yeah, can you just give some context on this 70%? Is that higher, lower, on par with other hospitals in this? I'm just trying to understand, like, is the ask here for a higher rate of reimbursement, would that put it out of, comparison with other hospitals, or what, how does it compare to other hospitals around the state?
Sage.
Hi, I didn't know if you wanted to take that, Ryan. It's 70%. Medicaid reimbursement differs from state to state. So depending on the state, there's different levels of reimbursement. For New York State, the current rate is 70%, and that would be for all Medicaid patients statewide.
Got it. And are you aware of other hospitals that have successfully advocated to the state to get a higher rate of reimbursement?
I know this is something we advocate for every year for the New York State budget. So this is pretty much our written in stone ask every year around budget time, because it is so low compared to, as Ryan said earlier, private insurance, and also it's low in comparison to Medicare. Medicaid is different from Medicare. Just to, I'm sure that you know this, but just a brief, update is that Medicaid is for the people who are very low income, disabled, women and children who don't have any other insurance.
And just to follow up to that, does Medicare reimburse 100%, or do they do like 90 or something else?
I don't believe Medicare is 100, but it's closer to 100 than Medicaid.
To kind of go back to Yaron's question, so I don't know, Sage, if Medicaid does this. I don't believe they do. But Medicare, certain hospitals can actually get a kind of preferred status with Medicare, and they're able to actually be reimbursed at higher rates. And I know this Memorial Sloan Kettering is one of those hospitals, because they're kind of seen as like an expert in cancer care and have better outcomes. So Medicare preferentially reimburses at a higher rate, which does help given kind of an aging population. But Medicaid, I believe, is different, Sage. And as far as I know, Bellevue got and given that.
Exactly, because it's one is administered, they're administered differently, and Medicaid is state. So yes, you're correct.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm asking, I'm not trying to like quiz. I'm asking because I was looking at the language of the CB6 resolution. I was just thinking if we were able to point to like, hey, you did this for this hospital, could you also do it for Bellevue, would make that stronger. So that's just why I was asking. But anyway, thanks.
Yeah, just a quick one. For the 30% funding gap that's left, what fills that hole? Is it the profit from the non-Medicaid patients, or is it the government just subsidizes it?
I don't have an exact number. A large proportion of it is government subsidy anyways. So, almost either way the government ends up paying, it would just be better to kind of have it reimbursed. It's easier to kind of budget for and predict, because you are already budgeting for your care and have, the projected volumes, and you kind of then have to, on the back end, look at this gap, and the money isn't coming in as kind of predictably and evenly. And just kind of hope the government can help close the gap.
And it's state.
Yes.
State subsidizes it, yeah.
State, city as well, Sage?
I believe it's just the state for Medicaid. If you know anything about how the Affordable Care Act rolled out or Obamacare, it is, the states were given the option to expand their Medicaid program. Some states chose not to. You can maybe guess what states those were. Some states did it at a later date. Some states still have not done it, and they're have lost a lot of coverage for their constituents and for their residents. So I apologize. I'm in transit. So
Like, so Medicaid funding is a state program, but I think in New York it's half the state, half the county, in our case, the city. And then there's the city health and hospitals budget that would also be allocated to Bellevue. So what are the other programs from the state that would get a budget line for reimbursement or for any budget for public health or Medicaid, whatever?
That's a good question. Sage, do you know, kind of aside from the Medicaid and then the health and hospitals budget, does Bellevue also get like Department of Health or New York City Health and Mental Hygiene budget?
I'm not sure. I'd have to check that.
Well, I'm just trying to, so the ask is to lobby the legislators to improve the reimbursement rate statewide. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Charles?
Yes, hi. Could you speak to, apart from the emergency room, the other services that the hospital has, for mental health or primary care and things like that? Do you see your clinics really like, what's the word? Sorry, overbooked, long waits for so let's say there's someone who has having a mental health crisis and they want to have a follow-up with a psychiatrist, maybe they wouldn't be able to see someone for, maybe a few months or a good few weeks because of the demand. Is that demand because, as you said, with Medicaid not reimbursing much, in our area, especially in this community, I believe, as a Medicaid recipient myself, there isn't many providers in Manhattan that takes Medicaid anymore over the years because, independent ones from the hospital because of not being reimbursed. So a lot of patients have no choice but to go to, a large hospital to seek treatment because they have nowhere else to go. So are you seeing a lot of that demand from that cause of the lack of other places to go? Because like I said, this problem of reimbursement, a lot of people just, a lot of independent doctors think, well, what's the point if they're not going to get paid, the right amount?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to predict exactly where each kind of patient, the reason each patient presents to Bellevue versus any other hospital. Certainly for things like behavioral health, Bellevue kind of is the place to go. If it's someone who's picked up by EMS or the NYPD, they're generally taken to Bellevue if it's in Manhattan. And the wait times are pretty awful. Like I had mentioned, the census on the floors is above 100%. So that basically means that if you have, say, 100 beds, there might be 101 or more patients that need beds. So that ends up kind of overflowing the ERs because they need to house the patients somewhere. They're kind of into the hallways and everywhere, and kind of causes long wait times kind of downstream. So patients that should be going to the floors are waiting in ERs, taking up beds in the ER. So then patients who are coming into the ED can't get seen, can't get a bed. And the reason people again are presenting is difficult to predict if it's because their prior primary care physician decided not to take Medicaid anymore, or they're in crisis and need to present to an ER. Those are kind of all reasonable things to assume why people are showing up, and they're likely more coming to Bellevue than ever because it's the southernmost hospital in Lower Manhattan, with Mount Sinai Beth Israel closing, and a lot of people would generally present there. Being that it was a slightly lower volume, slightly lower acuity. So yeah, there's tough to predict why people are choosing, why the reason they decided to present now, and if it's because of lack of coverage because they're primary care or psychiatrists, whoever it might be. But the reality is the ERs are packed, the waits are bad. And Bellevue is undertaking some pretty innovative ways to try and reduce that with like a fast track in the ER to try and get people in and out who are lower acuity. But it can only help so much, and really the only way to expand it is to invest in the ER and the infrastructure, and that requires money.
I had a couple
And
of questions.
I will add to Ryan's. Ryan, I'm not sure if you're up to speed on this. We did just open, we moved our World Trade Center Health Center around the corner, and we used that unit to open a medical behavioral health unit for behavioral health patients requiring acute medical care. So that's another thing that just happened this week, as part of our behavioral health program and our efforts.
I had a couple of questions, and I'll ask them in turn. The first one is, so I understand that the gap is 30% right now, but what's actually the magnitude of that? Like, how much are we actually talking in terms of millions, billions? Like,
I'm actually not sure. Sage, do you know a dollar amount?
I do not. I can find that out.
it would just be helpful to put it in context because I know it's a percentage, but a percentage of what?
And Sage, it would be helpful to have the context both for Bellevue and then across the state if we're being asked to support this.
Yeah, and the second question is, Sage had mentioned that this is an annual request, and I'm curious if you've received any responses as to why those prior requests have not been granted.
This is actually my first year on the Community Advisory Board for Bellevue, so Sage might have some history on it.
I mean, it's a dollar and cents amount, so that's why they ask every year. And I believe that, I'm not sure how much it has crept up incrementally over the years, but I can find out. But it's a chronic issue. Medicaid reimbursement is a chronic issue in all hospitals. It especially affects Bellevue because we are a safety net hospital, public hospital.
So one question for me. So outside of the reimbursement rate, are you guys advocating for anything else in the legislature? Any other requests that you're asking support for? I see that this one is very focused on reimbursement. Is that the only ask you have?
We'll have like a kind of a list of asks, and I'm not 100% sure that's finalized yet. Sage, are we prepared to speak on anything beyond this?
Not at this time. Usually January 21st when the budget comes out is when we formulate our list of asks. But we can certainly get back to you with the other things we're asking for. But I know that we wanted to kind of get this in front of you at this meeting. And we know that it's always, Medicaid reimbursement is always on that list.
You spoke about EMS and NYPD bringing patients to you. Is there like a buffer dividing line of where NYPD brings it to you instead of like to Columbia Presbyterian with the New York State Psychiatric Center or to another hospital, another borough?
Oftentimes it's geography. Certain things like acuity are sort of no question. So if you're below probably, I don't know an exact line, I think it is kind of up depending on traffic and things like that, but they call it 42nd Street. If there's a trauma, you go to Bellevue. Above, you might go to Cornell. The only two level 1 trauma centers on the island are Cornell and Bellevue. Generally, kind of more acute psychiatric issues will go to Bellevue. Certainly anyone from Rikers, Bellevue is the place to go, no matter kind of what it is. Columbia being so far north, I think it's not necessarily the first place to go unless it's up in Washington Heights already or that area. And then it also just has to do with, aside from acuity, kind of other hospital ER, who knows how FDNY, EMS, or whatever company dispatches necessarily. But with Mount Sinai, Beth Israel closing, it is the southernmost hospital that's equipped to care for many things. Near Presbyterian Northern Manhattan is very much a community hospital. Labor and delivery, kind of minor bruises and falls and things like that. So really anything above that will end up at Bellevue if you're certainly below 14th Street.
And now we're the only comprehensive stroke center with the closure.
I guess just clarification, so is the resolution here supporting closing the entire gap or like a portion of the gap of the 30%?
In closing the entire gap is more than a pipe dream. But so I would say, Sage, correct me if this is not correct, but I would say it would end up being a portion of the gap, but advocating
But you're
any
asking
increase.
for the, because it says in the resolution, increase in Medicaid rates to reimburse Bellevue for the full cost of care provided. So is that the approach that's being taken?
Yes.
Okay.
So right now, where's the plug? I'm sorry if I missed it. Who's funding the remainder? The 70 to 100, is that just a loss to you guys, or is
No,
federal government
it's
funding it?
coming from government funding.
Which government?
State, city, kind of New York Health and Hospitals is a budget, the state helps fund it. Kind of the ironic thing is that increasing the Medicaid funding to Bellevue still comes from state funding, but our gap comes from state funding as well.
So what is this I'm trying to understand like what it accomplishes if the same source of capital is filling that hole. I don't really understand where the difference is.
They won't have to go to the budget every year, it'll be automatic payment.
Got it.
Exactly. So like a patient comes
Got
in for say if you have Cigna and you go to the hospital, they can say, okay, we know what we're getting from this patient. They do it at the same time, the same thing every time it will cover, and you can project, they have payer mixes and kind of project based on budgets and volume budgets, kind of like what they're going to get paid, what they can reimburse, what the margins will be. And then because Bellevue has the same things, but they know that there's going to be this huge gap, and it's kind of hoping that the state will reimburse that gap.
So every year
Otherwise, it's a loss.
every year the state hasn't changed when's the last time that there was a change to the reimbursement?
I am not sure.
And I guess I would assume that the pushback is probably cost prohibitive. I mean, we don't have any context here of like the aggregate dollar amount. I know Mark mentioned that. Like, I don't know, is this like a multi-billion-dollar hole, or is it something that is?
Just from research, if the gap is filled, it would be 4.3 billion for the entire system and 863 million for Bellevue.
Well, let's keep this folks have
Every year.
questions and we can discuss it.
Got it.
Any more
Got it.
questions?
Okay.
Charles,
Yes, I was curious to know, Mount Sinai, when they proposed to close down Beth Israel, they claimed it was due to the building being very old, it was very expensive, the upkeep, and again, Medicaid wasn't reimbursing enough, and they weren't getting enough patients, etc., etc. If you guys don't get reimbursed, an increase in the reimbursements down the road, if a few years down the road, will Bellevue be having the same issues as Mount Sinai had with Beth Israel? And I just want to quickly add one last thing, which is last time I last year had to go to the emergency room, just for people to be aware, the ambulance, it all depends on the capacity of the emergency rooms, of which emergency room the patient goes to, even if they request they don't want to go to, let's say they don't want to go to Beth Israel. Sorry, they don't want to go to Bellevue, they want to go somewhere else. It's that, it's all down to how full that emergency room is at that time.
So as far as kind of the fate of Mount Sinai Beth Israel and if that would happen to Bellevue? The short answer is no, because we have kind of the backdrop of the backstop of funding from the state, support from the state, and kind of the mandate of a safety hospital is safety net hospitals that sort of can't happen. So sure, the building could be older than say NYU, but kind of a lot of the arguments about Beth Israel closing is that the state has to allow a hospital to close. And that's kind of what dragged on this whole process is arguments and lawsuits against the state with the state allowing it to close. But realistically, there's no kind of no parent system, privatized system that would benefit from a Bellevue closure. In the case of Mount Sinai Beth Israel, Mount Sinai, the system will be able to sell that land for hundreds of millions, I believe pushing billions of dollars. And that kind of benefits the rest of that system instead of it being a hospital that loses, I forget the exact figure, but millions of dollars a year. It simply can't happen to Bellevue because of the mandate of a safety net hospital.
Any other questions from committee members? Okay, seeing none, we'll open it to any comments from members of the public. Who is just Anthony? Anthony, would you like to speak? If so, raise your hand. Okay, so we will now enter business session. Where only members of the committee can speak unless called upon. So we are being asked to support Bellevue in their request for funding. We have a draft resolution that came from CB6, but we're not wed to that. We can put forward, if we decide a resolution to support whatever would be appropriate, we could elect to take no action. It's up to the committee's discretion. So in the past, we've had updates from Bellevue, and we supported requests in different types of requests. I can't recall top of mind. I don't know if we supported Medicaid reimbursement increase specifically, but we've had a number of updates in the past. So it's up to the committee. So please raise your hand if you'd like to speak.
I have a question.
Sure.
So Bellevue's in 6, right? Community Board 6?
Mhm.
It's on the East Coast.
Mhm.
And we are Community Board 5. How come this is before us?
So even though it's in 6, many residents of CB5 do use Bellevue, so it's utility that we gain support from. And I think Bellevue and members of our board and have a relationship that's been.
So it wouldn't only be 5 and 6 and 5, it might be 6 and 1 and 6 and 2.
Potentially, yeah. So CB6 is the committee for which we have a draft resolution for, and they are expressing their support for closing the reimbursement gap. So that's the draft that I had circulated. So we could have a similar resolution. We could not. We could have a letter. Except for discretion.
I think this is a great proposal to bring in front of the full board and discuss here. The one challenge I have personally is the difference between supporting safety net institutions like Bellevue and then other private institutions that are still not for profit but might not be safety net hospitals. The challenge is then like the non-safety net hospitals might already have enough funding to generally cover these gaps that exist. And if you were to propose this locally or at the state level, it'll be very difficult to carve out this increase in reimbursement rates just for safety net hospitals due to lobbying and like other constraints. So I would support a resolution that says for safety net hospitals that treat all patients, that we should cover reimbursement rates to 100%. But I think if we were to say that to be true for all hospitals in the city, then we should do like additional research as a committee and try to understand what the implication looks like for that.
Just to follow up on that, just a point of clarification. Is this resolution just targeted for Bellevue Bellevue specifically, or would it raise the vote? Or raise the vote?
So as written, it's requesting, it's targeted specifically.
Gotcha.
But it's also saying like increase the reimbursement rate overall, which, you know, depending on how you phrase it, would apply statewide.
Right,
What we can be as targeted or as broad as we want.
right. I mean, I think, you know, Mo raises an interesting point where if you have theoretically a for-profit hospital that also gets some Medicaid patients that's already profitable, you're in effect giving them more money when they don't, you know, they've already planned for that loss. As long as it's targeted at Bellevue, I guess would be the nuance that I didn't appreciate.
Yoden?
Sorry, you had mentioned the safety net hospital. Is that a official legal designation, or is that just sort of like the rough term we're describing them as?
Join it on.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure that it's officially like an official legal definition.
Yeah.
If safety net hospital is, but there is a legal definition surrounding kind of like Bellevue's mandate, the mandate of all the health and hospitals.
So there would be some way to carve that.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Looks like I'm finding some information out there about the legal definition of
Not
that.
a lawyer, but
Yeah,
it's
not-
basically the closest thing.
Yoden.
Yeah, my question is very similar to Mohit's. And in the draft that we were presented from CB6, there's this term, maybe, if somebody could explain to me, if Sage is still there, when we hear NYC Health and Hospitals, does that refer to all the hospitals in New York City? Or are those, does that include the private hospitals? Because the way the Reso is drafted now, it says NYC Health and Hospitals / Bellevue. And so I just want to know I'm in favor of supporting full reimbursement for the safety net hospitals only. And is that what is in the Reso from CB6?
And so I believe
Is that
this
what that term means, NYC Health and Hospitals / Bellevue?
This is Adrienne. Hi. New York City Health and Hospitals is our umbrella that we're municipal health care for all of New Yorkers. So the other hospitals that are under our jurisdiction would be Jacobi, would be Harlem, would be Metropolitan, would be Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So that's the extent, you know, all those hospitals are part of the New York City Health and Hospital system. The way that Bellevue is designated as New York City Health and Hospital / Bellevue. So this is specifically just for Bellevue.
Oh, okay. So this is only for Bellevue.
Correct.
Okay, well, I would support, reimbursement for all the safety net hospitals. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Justine, were you saying?
I have no problem with Medicaid paying the full rate for every service at any hospital that it's rendered. I don't think that something like Cornell, as an example, is not like making money off the fact that they get paid the full rate for a Medicaid service. So I have no issue with that at all. But the New York City Health and Hospitals is like its own Cornell network or Northwell. The way Northwell is a network of hospitals, New York City Health and Hospitals isn't a network of hospitals. It's just the public hospitals instead of some privately owned network of hospitals. So that was my kind of comment in general on the question. But I read it as it was written that Bellevue is advocating on behalf of all Medicaid reimbursement for the state, which is fine. I would support that too. I didn't read that resolution to say it was Bellevue's only advocating for themselves to get paid better.
Yeah,
So I don't know what other people.
So we can decide what we want to support.
Yeah.
So as written, it's saying like low Medicaid reimbursements are bad and they're supporting an increase in Medicaid reimbursement rates to reimburse Bellevue. So it's like
Okay.
you could, it could be the impact of it, it could be the direct
Okay, Got it.
focus of it. So we can decide if we want to support it across the board, if we want to support it just for Bellevue, if we want to support it for just safety in the hospitals. I think it's up to our discretion. You're on.
Yeah, I would support a resolution that was targeted specifically at Bellevue. I think that's sort of what is before us today. And also to Mike Kavak's point, like once you start bringing in we just get further afield of our district. And I don't know the propriety of us opining about hospitals that are just much further away. So let's stick to the one that's closest. Let's stick to the one in front of us. So I would be in favor of a targeted resolution about Bellevue.
All right.
So I would support that view. The only condition is that I think Bellevue is the hospital that serves like the center for the entire system. So all patients from all boroughs can be brought to Bellevue. Is that correct?
Yes.
So it really does apply then to all the state and hospitals because it's a tertiary kind of hospital, but I would also be in support of supporting Bellevue. I think it effectively does the same thing. Plus it's closer to our district, which is, I think, the priority, the big one.
Yes.
I mean, I obviously would also support that. I just don't have enough information from like a dollar perspective of what it really implies, and I just don't have like the kind of like the full story. Like, and it's a little bit complicated. I think we're trying to oversimplify something that is super complex, and this only kind of addresses a few points and a few data points, and I'm just not educated enough to really make the right decision for myself. So,
Charles.
Yes, I was wondering if it's possible to not only include the reimbursement for Bellevue, but to mention, I just want to say, as your fellow board member who's a resident of our district and who is on Medicaid, we don't have many providers here in our district who take Medicaid, be it dermatology, psychiatry, dental and all that. And a lot of Medicaid recipients like myself, we have to actually take transportation, which costs you, the taxpayer, even more money to go out of borough to Queens or Brooklyn to see a dentist or see a primary care doctor or something like that. And when I have asked doctors who suddenly stopped taking Medicaid, why is it that they stopped? They're honest with me and they say it's because we don't get reimbursed enough, and we are in a mental health crisis, and we need to do more to have care that's directed to the people on Medicaid who are in the district where they live, in their neighborhood, right? They really shouldn't be having to go all the way to Queens or Brooklyn and far out like that. And it would actually save New York State a lot of money, because then you wouldn't have so many trips booked on the ambulettes and medical car services. So I think if we maybe include that, the few providers we do have in our district should also, in CB5 should be getting reimbursed also, and that might incentivize more people to come, to practice more in our district for people on Medicaid. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And I will just note, I just put up some information, and for 2021 at least, if Medicaid had reimbursed all of Bellevue's costs, it would have incurred an additional $863 million for just Bellevue. And if it was for all of New York City health and hospitals collectively, that would have been $4.3 billion. But you're on, is there your hand was up? You?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is most people on the committee were supportive of a targeted resolution for just Bellevue. There were one person in favor across the board, one person a bit hesitant to take a position with the lack of full information and context in front of us. But do people feel comfortable moving forward with a targeted resolution based on the results of that conversation? Seeing nods.
I would say yes. The only other thing I would say would be something like this. The only way it gets any kind of attention or headroom is if it goes through the board unanimously. So, you know, to the extent that we could create the wording as broad as possible to get everyone to kind of sign on board, I think that would help. You know, if it ends up being one of these, you know, 60-40 type votes, I think they're gonna kind of shoot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah, like maybe if we were to add some type of language talking about like the broader fiscal concerns and want to be responsible with, you know, the state's resources, to kind of. Sure.
Yeah, to add to the point, it's like, I would have more, it would be more helpful for me if there was a number or there was something to make it more clear so that I can say, hey, maybe if we speak to a few experts, maybe with that money, if it's $1 billion or $2 billion or whatever it is, maybe build another hospital somehow. And that will overall bring down the cost of healthcare just by having competition in general. I just thinking that there might be other ways to use the resources that we're thinking about bridging the gap, where we could take those resources and build, to Charles's point, more facilities that might actually make the market a little bit smoother. So difficult for me to, I don't know, somebody mentioned that this needs to be unanimous.
It does not have to be unanimous.
Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna take the position that I wouldn't be able to vote yes on this, although inside of me I would, but I don't have enough information to take that step.
You're on?
Yeah, I totally respect Morris's position. I guess what I would say in response is, I would offer that we can think of our roles on the community board as advocates and not appropriators. So the question before us isn't how should $800 million be used to best impact the medical system? The question before us, as I interpret it, again, I respect Morris's position. The question before us is, should Bellevue get more money? And I think as representatives of CB5, that's sort of like all we need to answer. And a targeted resolution that just says Bellevue should get more money is sort of within our purview. And the question isn't what is, in my mind, again, totally respect the larger point, is not what should come at the expense of that, what else could be done with that money, that those are sort of appropriations questions that would sort of come next. So I would just offer that I think a targeted sort of tight resolution that answers that question and says this is a really important service for the district and for the island of Manhattan, and that it needs to be better funded, I think could get widespread support. It still may not get Morris's support, but I think that's sort of our best chance.
Is there a motion?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So you go to the hospital, you have an operation, and you see the bill, it's $358,000 to take out your kidney or whatever. And then you see that your health care covered it, and they paid $8.52 or something like that. The money that we're talking about, is that the $8.52 or the $358,000 that was billed, or the difference between what was paid and what was billed, or just what is the money that we're looking to make up here? Which number? Is it the number to reimburse the hospital for their total charge, 8 cents for a thread, or?
Yeah, as I understand it, it's the cost of the service that's being provided, not the same cost that you guys would provide private insurers to start the negotiation. Is that right? Yeah.
So when a hospital is billing, there's costs and there are charges. So if you are covered by Cigna, there's the charge for a kidney removal. And the charge is what the insurance company sees. This is generally going to the private insurers, because then Medicare and Medicaid set rates that can be charged. There are caps to charge. And there's the cost. The cost is what it actually, what the hospital actually spends on removing a kidney. So that's the threads, the the scalpel, the surgeon's time, the anesthesiologist's time, the drugs. Those costs are what we're talking about here. So no matter what we charge Medicaid, we only recoup about 70% of what it actually costs.
So that $8 that was granted is a larger amount than it seems weighed against the actual bill.
Right.
It's closer to the actuality.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Charles?
Yes, I just wanted to just add, just to help my fellow board member, Mike, which is, I get the bills, you know, from when I have hospital visits, and it's really shocking that a hospital, you know, when I see a doctor, for example, and they want to charge $154 for just a routine examination, Medicaid will pay something like $8 or $15 or something really tiny towards it. So it's really awful what they get reimbursed. No wonder a lot of them don't want to take Medicaid, you know, because it's like, what's the point? They get reimbursed such little amounts. It's ridiculous.
Thank you.
No, yeah, I was gonna make a motion.
Go ahead.
I would move that we support this resolution with just making the final sentence a little bit more specific to say that it supports the rates to reimburse New York City safety net hospitals for the Blue Cross of Care.
Yeah, and I'll know we can modify and beef up some language too.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know.
We don't have to do this
Needed-
exact
okay.
resolution, but in spirit.
Even
like,
better,
In
yeah.
spirit, materially similar, it's modifying it accordingly. Great, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Let's take it to a vote.
So
Moet?
our vote is to approve some resolution in support of this concept.
Yes, targeted.
Safety.
Yeah.
Yes.
Morris?
Sorry, our vote is to approve a motion
We
to
are,
work on a resolution.
so we are approving, right now we're approving resolution. In support, basically in support of the spirit of their ask, focusing specifically on like Bellevue and safety net hospitals.
And if I abstain, is that a,
No, you can.
I can do, I'm gonna abstain.
Julie,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Mike.
Yeah.
Riley,
Yes.
Mark Hirschberg. Yes. Mike Kavak,
Yes.
Isabel,
Yes.
you're on.
Yes.
Charles,
Yes,
Tiffany,
Yes.
Yoden,
Yes.
and Justine.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, Ryan, Sage, Karen, thank you so much for coming in and speaking with us. So this resolution, when we write it up and finalize it, will be going to the full board a week from Thursday. And then once it's approved or rejected, we'll have our final position in the matter. And we'll be sure to let you know. And feel free to attend if you want. There's a public speaking session at the very beginning. But otherwise, we'll let you know about the outcome.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. So that's our last voting item of the evening. So the last item on our agenda is doing some 2025 planning and priority setting. So we'll pass the baton over to Mohit.
Awesome. So at the start of every year, as you all know, we like to think of, sit together and brainstorm potential topic areas and areas of interest to the broader board and committee that we might want to investigate personally because we have an interest in that area or because we feel like it's an area of need. So similarly this year, we'll use, let's say, the next 20 to 30 minutes to just brainstorm potential ideas and topic areas that might be of interest to individuals here. And then what we'll do is Tristan and I will, after the meeting, group our committee members against each of the topic areas, and they'll serve as research starting points for 2025, where we can start to identify any policy initiatives that have taken place at the state, local, or community board level that we might want to bring in front of our committee and then the full board to discuss as areas of priority. Just as a little bit of a recap, so this district of statement needs that we passed at the end of 2024 we had three priority needs that we had discussed. The first was homelessness, the second economic recovery, and the third affordable housing. And then there were additionally 7 topic areas that we had gone through, ranging from healthcare, education, public safety, to transportation, and parks, among others. So we'll take a pause there. Happy to have an open discussion, or if helpful, if anyone knows if they have a particular area of interest they'd like to talk about, we can start there. Go ahead.
So the land use committee is starting to put together an affordable housing plan, and we have a fellow that's helping us gather data.
Okay.
There could be some overlap. We could do joint committee meetings if needed, but if you want to bring that on the table, I'm happy to help with that.
Perfect. So I will tag you then against, like, let's say housing, if we do by the topic areas, housing, economic development, and land use. Right? Perfect. Any other areas of interest?
At some point in our history, we had a mental health task force. Is that kind of wrapped into healthcare now, or is that separate?
So the closest topic area that the city gives us is healthcare and human services. But we were thinking of starting the mental health task force last year. So we can have a separate topic area for mental health and have that be like an area of interest for 2025.
I mean, I know it was kind of in response to Mayor Adams' mental health plan, but
yeah,
is his plan kind of DOA now?
so I have no idea.
Yeah.
He's DOA.
I assume it's kind of stalled a little, yeah.
But we did have a couple of discussions in the summer of last year where we brought in folks to talk about the bill, and then I think we paused. So if you'd be up for reigniting that, potentially seeing, and that's a good example of what we can discuss, is like, there's any initiative at the city level or the state level for mental health, we can always bring it to committee and discuss it.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
You're on?
I'll join you in that as
I
well.
was just gonna add to that, there is, so, Council Member Botcher has made the expansion of the Be Heard program like a key part of his legislative initiatives, which is having a mental health professional in every precinct. And so I think that would be a really natural way in for us to, like, should we advocate for that? We should maybe talk to him, invite to a meeting. So I'm just throwing that out there as that could be a very particular thing that with mental health that we look at.
Amazing. I think we had a bunch of discussions on Be Heard last year. I think Mary was spearheading a lot of that discussion. So it'd be great to hear from the council member and see if there are any updates or what the new position might be.
I think in light of recent news and articles, it might be good to focus a little bit more on public safety in the transit system, and around the subway system areas. I think that many of us probably take the subway every day. I personally don't feel too safe on it, especially at certain stations over others. Some in CB5, some outside of our community board. So thinking through what the city and state are doing about it and how we might be able to offer our best recommendations.
Awesome. So would you be okay with getting tagged to public safety? It would be public safety and emergency services.
Sure.
Do we consider public safety a BEX? I mean, what Morris just said could also be transportation. It could also be public spaces. Like, I just want to make sure, like, is that clearly our purview?
We could touch base with them and like make sure we're not getting over our skis. But I know like in the past, like we haven't really focused a lot on like legislative action. That's not popped up in this committee, but we can flag at them and see if they want to collaborate on.
I have no objection. I was just curious if we considered that our purview. Okay.
Well, I think our hook would be the city services that are related to that, the provision.
I just found out about this a few days ago and I emailed Tristan that the timelines don't match up. The Department of Sanitation's rules for containerization and the bids collecting trash and how to put the trash out for collecting the bids are against the rule change that the SDNY just made, and I don't know if the SDNY is gonna go ahead with the rule change or not, because last time they were here, the representative didn't want to speak about it because they were changing their rule again. And so I don't know if they will change it a third time, but the bids are of the taking a point of view like, well, maybe we just don't collect trash anymore because it's too onerous with the rule change that SDNY is proposing. So then that will make the streets dirtier and will create a, an economic cost to the business district. So again, SDNY is not coming to us as a community board, even though we have a lot of bids in our district. And I wish SDNY would come to us more often. And I don't know how to, force them like MPA. I don't know how to force agencies that don't want to talk to us.
Yeah, I think it's been a while since we asked for an update from them on our end, so we can always touch base with Marisa and send out an inquiry, especially on that email you sent on the role specifically. That could be a good prompt.
We can group that under like human services though, maybe. And then we can
it goes under sanitation, goes under economics.
yeah, there's not really a good category that the city gets for that, but
We also don't need to be wedded entirely to like those buckets. They're good buckets, but like if you want to go from it. Sorry, Charles?
Yes, I was wondering now, one of our neighboring community boards, I can't remember which one, I think it might be 4. They have, circling back to public safety, they have a representative from the precinct where they are to, give information and reports and things like that. I know our precinct 13, I believe, they have neighborhood meetings now and again. But I'm wondering if we can get someone from that precinct to occasionally come in to be available to the public, be available to us, to tell us what's going on in our neighborhood, what crimes are trending, or what things they're doing to help stop shoplifting or things like that, or just be available to the public. Like give the public another chance to speak to them, to bring concerns and things like that, and even community board members who have concerns about things happening in the neighborhood. So I'm wondering if there's a way we can invite them in to maybe be a regular a part of our meetings, at least once a month or whenever. I think that might be a good idea. Like I said, it'd be good to have another way for the public to have access to them, to ask questions and things like that.
I don't know, do we have precedent to bring in like police precinct members or?
I know like sometimes there's like more private meetings between like the board office and them. I'm not sure if I can't recall them coming to like Bex specifically for a number of years at least.
I think it's a good idea, Charles. Maybe we could talk to Marisa and figure out if there's like a general state of the district type of crime update that we can get. I know in the end of year document for District of Safety Needs, there's some data in there about our district's crime statistics. But we could actually talk to Marisa about more specific Q&A type session with someone from public safety.
Yeah, and like some of them also have like community liaisons, so like we could reach out to them and see like if there are any issues that they're pushing or things that they want the community to know about, and then have them potentially come here and then talk about other issues as well. But yeah. Any other topics?
Part of resiliency when we were doing our budget and climate guidance, maybe something we can look into.
Love that. You put me down. Okay. Awesome.
What was that? Could you just repeat that? I couldn't make it out.
Sustainability, resiliency.
Yep.
You're on?
Yeah, my issue is one that sort of cuts across, I think, a lot of things. So, and it's sort of AI writ large. So the city has really made AI has really pushed agencies to figure out what they're doing with generative AI. Different initiatives. It had a really botched launch of like a help chat bot. I don't know if people saw that, where I forget what department it was, but it was giving misinformation essentially to people when people were asking it questions. I would love to know what OTI is doing. They've tasked every agency with having sort of plans on how they're using generative AI. There may not be anything there yet, but there may be. So I wonder if we could just maybe ask OTI. I don't know if we've ever worked with them before, but for an update.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting. Anything else? You know, I think you're on mute.
You're, okay.
Okay, thanks, sorry. I would like to know, I mean, I don't know that this is should be a priority for us, but it's something that I would like to know a lot more about, and that is what is going on with compliance with local law 97 to reduce our greenhouse emissions, because I think that is now in effect, and I know my building is doing absolutely nothing on it. And I know my mother's building has started, and they have all these capital costs, and they're being hit with all these charges for like the next 10 years. And I wonder how all the buildings are gonna pay for compliance, and what's going on. Why is my building doing nothing? And some buildings are really moving forward seriously on this. So if we could find out more about that.
Maybe that's sustainability.
Unfortunately,
They are paying fines.
a lot of buildings are just paying for it. A lot of new buildings are being constructed not in compliance as well, which is really,
Wow, that's great.
yes, feel free to join our group.
So include sustainability, resiliency, sustainability, climate. Yeah, awesome. Good, and I'll put you down in that group as well.
Okay, thank you.
Amazing. Any other topics? And we have our 7 like broader topic areas as well, the city provides us. So after the meeting, we'll share across the Google Sheets. So anyone can sign up to any of the areas that are of interest. And then we can either form smaller subcommittees or like offline groups. The objective is throughout the course of the year, we as a committee can bring forth like any new legislative issues, any new news that comes up that we might want to discuss at committee and then take a position on, so we can self-generate ideas. Charles?
Yeah, I was just gonna quickly say, and I do apologize if this is maybe not too much in our remit. And I was just thinking, if it's possible to have some sort of group or task force to do sort of outreach, maybe to call around churches or senior centers or homeless shelters in our district, just to say, Community Board 5 is here. We're here. We love to hear from more of the public, and I just thought it would help. Instead of you might think, hey, maybe that's a job for the office to do, but I feel like they already are busy doing already what they do, and it might be a good idea to have something separate where maybe there's a few volunteers who have some time on their hands, like myself. I have time, and if anyone else is retired or has time, maybe to just do some calling around and just letting people know that we're here, and that about what we do, and about how we have public sessions, about how they can connect, and how they're welcome to come and speak about topics and things on their mind. I just think a bit more outreach to in our district to get more of a presence to let people know we're here, because some people might not know. So I don't know, it's just something I was thinking about.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. We'd likely have to coordinate that with the office. But I think it's a great idea.
Okay, well, that concludes our last agenda point for the evening. We'll open the floor for any new business, if any. Seeing none, we'll close the meeting. Thanks all for joining, especially those who braved the colds this evening. I'm looking forward to starting 2025 off strong. Have a good evening.
Thank you.